Hey everyone. So today I'm continuing with this special series where I do more of a personal episode. I had the opportunity of getting interviewed by my younger brother Matt already, and that was such a special opportunity. But today I am continuing where I kind of left off. So at the end of season one, which was about 10 episodes into my podcast, I wanted to kind of go behind the curtains and talk more about why I became a teacher in the first place, especially because it wasn't necessarily a profession that I was immediately drawn to or I wanted to necessarily pursue straight out the gate or since I was a kid. So that was quite the journey getting there. This episode is going to be a little bit different. I think I wanted this episode to be a little more about the lessons learned as a teacher. So this year I'll be teaching for 11 years. It's been certainly a lot of ups and downs along the way, like any profession and any journey. But I had to learn a lot as well. And it wasn't something that just was automatic for me. So I kind of wanted to talk more about the lessons learned throughout this experience, throughout these 10 years that I've had the chance to be teaching. And I hope that you enjoy this special episode as we conclude season 2. So one of my first things that I learned in my teaching experience was your subject matter and your expectations of your subject matter. I got my certification when I started teaching in biology. I was getting hired for anatomy physiology. And I learned very quickly there is no such thing as an anatomy physiology certification. It's more just life sciences, aka biology. And biology is rather all-encompassing. It covers environmental science, of course, covers biology, covers anatomy, covers marine science. So there's actually quite a wide net, whereas there's other sciences that are a little more strict, like chemistry is typically chem classes, and then physics is, of course, physics classes. So I started teaching and as substitute teaching, as I shared in my first episode, in my standalone episode. But I'm now in a position where I need to prepare and take a test. Not only did I have to take a biology certification exam, but I also needed to take an exam certifying that I was qualified to be a teacher. I was quite fortunate that both exams I passed on my first attempt. The general education test, I would say, is closer to like what an SAT feels like with English and vocabulary and reading comprehension and mathematics. Whereas the subject matter exam is certainly meant to be more specified to what you're teaching. So for my case, it was a lot of biology and some things that, quite frankly, it's been a little while since I had gotten as familiar with. So one of the early lessons, like I mentioned, that I had to learn is improving upon your overall concepts and how you feel prepared. One of the most humbling things I ever experienced as a teacher in my years so far was my first year teaching by myself. The first full year, should I say. I had a student who was excellent. She was top of the class for all intents and purposes. But it's kind of funny how life goes. It turns out she was the daughter of my college anatomy and physiology classes. In college at UCF, I had an anatomy professor, shout out Dr. Sam, and his wife was Dr. Ahangari. Both of them were medical doctors, but also teaching professors. And they pride themselves in teaching these classes like med school level. So I had to work really, really hard for a class like that, but I don't think I'd ever had an experience in my life where I felt like I really earned the subject matter. Like I really earned the grade that I got. And, I ended up getting a B in the class. I was a little salty that I was like, I think 2 points away from an A. But regardless of the ultimate result, I felt like I legitimately learned. So when I was taking that college class, when our class wouldn't do so well, our Dr. Sam especially would kind of poke jabs at us and kind of poke fun at us college kids, saying that his daughter at this point would have been like middle school or probably actually elementary school. She knew more about the human body than us, a bunch of college kids. And of course, we're thinking, okay, we get it. We struggled on this test. We'll do better next time. But lo and behold, it's years later. It's my first full year teaching on my own. And again, it almost feels like a perfect situation where it's like, wow, what are the odds of this happening? And I end up teaching their daughter. She was exactly what her parents would say. She knew exactly all the content. She would correct me from time to time in a very nice way, or check like, hey, what about this? What about that? And of course, she did exceptional in my class. She ended up going to med school, and I'm fairly positive she's a practicing physician now. But one of the final gifts that her dad gave me after she graduated my class was a new copy of his textbook for anatomy. So I thought that was a very nice gesture. But ultimately, it kind of just connects to my first learning lesson that I shared with you guys, is just don't be afraid to recognize the parts of your subject matter or the parts where you're not as proficient that you need to do some work to get better at. Lesson number 2 for me was, again, another kind of similar related lesson is, and this is kind of like a tagline of my podcast, is growth isn't linear. It's something that I, of course, have gotten very comfortable or more comfortable with myself, but it's also something that I've had to kind of come more terms with my students. I think something that I would succumb to so often in the earlier years of my teaching experience was expecting that for my students to see, or for me to see that they were doing well, they would have to have good grades on tests, or do their homeworks, or do their assignments, or get the answers correct when I called on them. And yes, usually those things are indications of growth and success. But what I started to learn is that not all students do so well there. And if you can adjust your expectations in a way, but also how you record growth, how you record adaptation, how you record improvement, that's when you can really start to recognize, okay, wait a second, there's some genuine improvement happening from the student. And how about I try to meet them halfway? How about I try to figure out new ways to assess them versus the classic methods that may not be working so well for them any longer? So that was another really big learning moment for me. Another one came much later in my in my teaching experience. And it's my third lesson that I've written down for myself, that mentorship changes you more than it changes them. I've been very lucky that in these years, a lot of students felt that they could trust me and they felt that they were comfortable with me. But later on in my high school teaching experience, I started taking more of a proactive approach to try to work with students who were in need. Throughout my master's, I learned a lot about the disciplinary system, and it's different state by state and school by school, but there's a lot of overarching problems with how we discipline our students and unfortunately create this school to prison pipeline, and a lot of recurring instances where ultimately students just end up being out of the classroom longer. They continue to detest school and have a negative relationship with the adults that ideally they should be some positive relationships. And, I'm not unrealistic. I don't expect everyone to be your best friend, but certain people to be in your corner, certainly. And so I helped start up a thing at my school where we would work with at-need students, basically. And what I learned very quickly is some of these kids who have had it worst, some of these kids who are repeat offenders, some of these kids who get detentions or suspensions on a regular basis, oftentimes just feel alone. We don't know the extent of their home situation. We don't know how or what their friendships look like and the influences that are coming from their friends. And just having one person in their corner who is genuine in their corner and actually trying to say, hey, I'm here for you, and I believe in you. More than that, I feel like you have what it takes to be successful. That can go a long way. I don't think that is the ultimate solution for all. I think there are certainly larger problems that need to be addressed, but it's certainly something that can help. It's just showing that you're there for them, showing that you want to be that person that can help them when needed. And oftentimes you'll be surprised that you're the one person who gives them the time of day, and that changes everything for them. My next lesson that I wanted to conclude with is an interesting one. It has a little more to do with bias and recognizing my own mistakes and recognizing my own errors. So, once again, this was a little later into my teaching career. And I know I'm not necessarily a master or anything like that. I still have a lot to learn. But as I was pursuing my master's degree for educational leadership, a large part of those classes not only are about how do you lead other teachers, but also how do you run a school? And if a school is meant to be run in a just and equitable manner, equity is the key word there. You're aiming for a representation of all in a fair method and in a way that everyone can be seen. I never once thought in my years teaching that I was treating certain students differently or certainly negatively. However, when it comes down to bias and implicit bias for that matter, there is such a thing as positive bias. And that was something I kind of had to condition myself to be more aware of. So often, and I'm sure any teachers that might be listening to this can recognize this as well, but so often you'll have classes that get to know you and they get comfortable with you and they love to ask, hey, Mr. NG, who's your favorite class? And is it us? And of course, I would never say, yeah, guys, it's you guys. You're my favorite class. Everyone else sucks. No, I would never say that. But I think it is human that every teacher does have favorites and every teacher does have classes they prefer and maybe some classes that are a little more difficult. And you kind of have to mentally prepare yourself for these things. And that's part of the job. But what I learned, or what I tried to kind of recognize, is as I would learn the faces and names and the behaviors of the students in my class, it was unfair for me to essentially give more leash in a way, or not necessarily more leash, but just assume that the high performer students already were on top of things and did not need more challenge, or just were given more grace in certain circumstances. Whereas other students who were struggling and were more, unfortunately, prone to behavioral problems may not have gotten the same grace. I know a solution to this that a lot of teachers have taken into effect that I applaud for doing this is they'll blind grade. They will purposefully, and you can do things like this with different services like Canvas, but they will purposefully make it that their assignments, you see no name associated with the assessment or the assignment, and you simply grade based off what you see. And I think that's actually a really clever idea and a really great idea to try to take your own biases out and recognize maybe certain people in your class are getting higher, not necessarily just higher grades, because, there's always going to be higher performers and lower performers, but maybe they're getting more of that window of flexibility or that window of grace that you weren't giving certain other students. So that was part of my learning experiences and things that I've been kind of coming more to terms with. As I enter my 11th year of teaching, as I kind of said earlier, I don't believe to be someone who's mastered this. I'm now going to be teaching 2 new subject matters at a brand new school with a whole new team of faculty. So I know there's a lot of challenges that come up with this, but I've tried to approach it with more of an open mind and also a learner's mind, and trying to say, hey, this can be a new challenge for me to push myself. I've really appreciated the 10 years that I've had in, and especially teaching anatomy and physiology, and feeling like I've really mastered, quote unquote, or really improved my proficiency of how to teach that class and really get as close as I could to a great experience for the students. But now I'm ready for something new. And as this season of catching up with Mr. NG, or Beyond the Classroom, as the season of catching up comes to a close, I think I'm excited more for what this next season will bring. And I already have some episodes banked on this, and I'm excited to release, but I really want to start getting a chance to interview people who have more wisdom and more experiences than me, or continue doing that, because I've already gotten some interviews with people that are older than me that have had more life experiences than me. That doesn't mean you're not going to hear some episodes with former students of mine or continue hearing stuff like that, but I'm really trying to shift the idea, or the theme, I guess, to what's next and what should I try to spend more time on and focus on. So if you heard this much, or you heard this far, I really appreciate all the time. Thank you so much for sticking with me for now 20 episodes, which is honestly so crazy. It's been an awesome experience. I've loved doing this and getting to catch up with all these people that I've had the chance to talk with. If you haven't yet, you can follow our account at the Catching Up Podcast on Instagram and all sorts of different social medias. And I try to do my regular uploads on Wednesdays and Fridays. But this has been Peter NG, and I'm signing off.